Take what? 5? All right. I'm going to be talking about systems theory and actions, applications to individuals, couples, and family therapy. I'm going to be referencing this book. Um, I'm going to try to keep a train of thought here without rambling too much because I know I have to keep this relatively short. Um, when I think of systems, I think of the word intersectionality. Intersectionality means that everything starts to overlap. In cultural diversity, intersectionality, especially when it's dealing with ethnicity and culture, intersectionality is a big thing, and so is also true for systems theory. I think that tends to be true in just the human experience. There's always going to be some overlap between parts of one's life in relation to each other. And systems theory talks about connections, and it talks about how um, everything is connected and everything interacts with each other to form some kind of meaningful relationship. And that's how we determine what relationships are, is through our interaction. That's how we're built, that's how we're wired, that's just what we do. So all these systems, they work together, right? And it forms a big picture, and they paint our big picture, a person's big picture, or a family's big picture, society's big picture, and they all work together. But it's never going to come down to just one single thing. Even if you take world events like C9/11, it wasn't just, oh, well, a terrorist attack. There's a reason why they're attacking. It's not that simple. Now, a person's condition can be explained by his and her relationship to the system of his family, and the family's condition could be just as just as clarified or defined by its relationship to one single person. Anybody who's dealt with drug addiction knows this. In the family, a lot of times it seems like, oh, it's always about Billy and his drinking or his meth, or it's always about dad and his gambling, or mom and her um, obsession with church. Um, Now, if you take a person or if you take a family, neither of these things can be explained through isolation. I mean, the human condition is sort of defined by interpersonal relationships. I gotta close this window. Is defined by interpersonal relationships, and that's, like I said, how we're wired, how we're built. We seek connection. That's how we are, and as a result, that's how we express. So one of the things that this book talks about is the idea of context, and how important context is in terms of therapy, when it comes to families, when it comes to people. Context, there's no such thing as absolute truth. It's always truth within context, truth within relations, truth from perspective. Context is also another word for circumstance, and we all know that circumstance is a bitch. So, but sometimes it's the circumstance that we see. Sometimes that's what we see at face value. So we have to put it into proper context. And in order to avoid getting caught up in those details, is keeping in mind what is called, what this book refers to as the meaningful wholes. Meaningful wholes, WHOLES, meaning, whenever I think of that, keeping somebody's meaningful whole, jokes aside, I think of the idea of positive regard, holding somebody in positive regard. Or, you know what? I don't necessarily like the things that you're doing, but I love you. I love the whole. I love the person. I don't like what you're doing. Um, Now, the way to avoid falling into the minutia, I don't know if that's the right word, the details of somebody's problem or addiction or just quirks, is not thinking in linear terms. Don't think, avoid linear thinking, meaning don't get caught up in A plus B equals C. Just remember A, B, C are part of a system. The system of a person is what you like, the result, the product. You don't have to like Taylor Swift. You don't have to like that they eat um, Flaming Hot Cheetos. I mean, you don't have to like those things about somebody to love them as a person, to hold them in positive regard. So that context is important. And that moves on to causality. For me, causality and context work together. They're kind of the beginning of a process, which will lead into communication, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Causality is the circular loop. The relationships, it's like, why does this happen? Causality loop. If you're looking for a single cause, sometimes that can turn into blaming. So finding the details, context and casualty as is the beginning, what are the patterns and what causes them. It's very important to find those things out. It's very important to identify those things. But this is when I think communication is important, because communication, causality and context, those things only go too far, only go so far. You can only go in circles for so long, because that's when communication starts to get into the picture. Because communication, there are like so many different ways that people communicate, and the best way to open a dialogue sometimes is to observe the type of communication that's going on, meaning what are they saying, what do they mean. And the book brings up something called report and command function, which is, report is linear, like factual, like I don't like broccoli. Command function is of a communication is based on the context of the person. Meaning, if you say to somebody, you know what, I don't like broccoli. Just because you don't like broccoli. You don't want broccoli, you don't like it. But they take it as you're only saying that to piss me off. The reason they think that is because of the context and the relationship, and that brings up the causality of the situation. It's going to just go on and on and on, and the only way you can get out of that is to A, not think linearly, B, know what you're saying. Are you saying something to be hurtful, or do they mean it hurtful? But it's like causality, the context of a causality can create divergent timelines. Instead of focusing on the negative, which is it's going to turn into blaming, focus on what is being said and listen to the person and that kind of thing. So we're at 8 minutes. All right, communication. Observing communication means not only being able to understand words, but also tone, body language, and sarcasm. And observing communication means to just observe all the things that they're saying, observe their tone, observe their body language, just pay attention to the things that they're saying but not saying. Like I said, we're hardwired to communicate, but we're also hardwired to express at the same time. So you get those things down, and then you get to the idea of change. How it happens whether we want it to or not. Change, I don't think change is something that can be avoided. I think that the only thing that we know for certain is right now. And we're in this moment, and really, if you want to get all metaphysical, now is the only thing that exists, really. But you don't know what real is, Mike, man. It's like, yeah, I know. But the importance of change is the importance of growth. When people come into therapy, I think that it goes down one of two roads. Change, they either want it and need it, or they don't see a problem. There are different things, but I think so. And for the purpose of this chapter, change, you have to understand that the way it works in a system is that ripple effect. If you change one thing, it's going to change the rest of it. And the goal through communication is to determine what it is that you want to change, determine what it is that you want it to change into, determine um, the causality. What is it going to be the divergent timeline from this change? What's going to be better? Is it going to be better? Do you want it? Don't you want it? There was that one thing that, a little joke in here that I thought was funny. How many therapists does it take to plug in the light bulb? Um, only one. Wait, it's like 11. One to actually do it, and 10 that know that the light bulb has to really want to change. um, that when you have a family, it's like you have to be able to understand that's what's going on, if that's what's going on. And part of the systems theory is to say, look, let's break this down. Let's understand what's going on here. If you don't want to change, then what about it? What about this new way, this new system? Are you resisting? Um, okay. I didn't really like the change chapter because it was kind of just vague about the system. It's like talking about the establishment. It's just like, okay, change is good, change is important, but let's be specific here. And it was a little specific, but the way that it was specific, I just didn't really think it was giving like examples about change and stuff like. I just didn't really care for that chapter because I think that change is inevitable, and I think that it's talking about how inevitable it is. It's just seemed like filler to me. Anyway, structure, structure, and a family system. There's a structure. And I think that when it comes to structure, a lot of the structure has to do with the personality type of the person. And this is like it's another example of intersectionality because you have the family system, but the family system a lot of times is has a hierarchy, and whoever that is has to do with, I guess, that person's personality traits. So you can bring up what's Erickson's stages of development. Sometimes people are just naturally inclined to lead or take charge or stuff like that, and that's just how that is, and that's not necessarily good or bad. What's good or bad is how they use that. Now, in a family system, I think the structure of a family, um, tends to fall in a hierarchy because it's just how it is. Sometimes it's the mom, sometimes it's the dad, sometimes it's really democratic and it's majority rule, but usually there's a hierarchy, and how that hierarchy works depends on the parenting style. And this book brought up the idea of where's it at? Empowerment versus domination, which I think is a really important one. A really important one because what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody who empowers somebody and inspires them, or do you want to be somebody who dominates somebody? And if that's the kind of system that you're going to live in, I don't really think you're going to really inspire like too much loyalty, because it's like that person's always going to be afraid of you. So secretly, they're always going to be looking for a way out. Then there's collaboration and competition. Are you creating an environment in your family to collaborate and share ideas, or is it always going to be a competition? Like, okay, I got to be better than Billy, okay, because I brought home a plus, and he, my ex's family's like that, very competitive, and they're all very accomplished people, but the level of stress that I've seen is crazy. Um, so how does that family system work? Through a hierarchy, but also it comes down to a system within a system, the family system within a social system and a belief system. So the structure depends on things like cohesion, communication, and flexibility. Now, the cohesion of the family depends on the communication and the flexibility. Now, if you have a family and they are in a hierarchy, and dad is a jerk, and everybody knows that you don't talk to him until he's had his first beer, or you're always afraid of him, um, communication is going to be limited. because you know that there's not going to be any flexibility in this guy's stubborn attitude. So you're going to be inclined to hide things, and it's going to be a family fear system, which is not going to be beneficial, I think, in the long term, because it's just going to make the cycle, the causality of making kids and people who work off of fear and submission rather than empowerment and encouragement. Um, I mean, it's important to have a hierarchy, but it's also, the word itself has a stigma to it. So, moving on. Let's pause this for a second. Okay. Next was historical and developmental patterns. That plays into the causality of it. That this whole systems thing, the key word is causality, and another key word is intersectionality. Um, and when you're looking for history, you have to say to yourself, okay, what are these patterns? Is it a vicious cycle? Where does this come from? What is this making? How did you end up like this? Or how does this system come to be? And how is it going? Are we learning anything from the history? Are we not? Are the same patterns repeating? Um, and that, is it working? So there's that. And then finally, there was, where is it? Social and cultural narratives. Um, this, I think, is becoming a big one as time moves forward, because people are becoming more aware of the intersectionality of the world, and they're being more culturally aware of how things are, and how the way that I live my life isn't the same way you live your life, and how we live our life in the United States, and the system of the United States isn't how people in, say, Britain or France or Africa live their lives. And when people come to this system, they bring pieces of them, which is the history, which is the context, which is the structure, which is everything about their system that they live in, their family, they're contained, they bring here. So it's important for us to keep in mind that those things exist, and this, it's not necessarily going to be about cultural, like, sensitivity per se, but it'll be about helping that person integrate into the system that they currently live in, and understanding that it is a system, and it is about context, and it is a work in progress, and it is what it is. And you can either work with that person and help them, one system become another system, because change is inevitable. Change happens. It just happens. It's what it is. You may not like it, you may not notice it, you may not acknowledge it, but it's there. And I think the point of this book is to make you understand that, or to put it into perspective, that all these things are playing in to the equation. Basically, this is an equation. This is an equation book that says these are the things that you should look at if you are going to get into this line of work, because it's never going to be at face value. And context, circumstance is a bitch, but it's real. You can either identify the cycles, identify the patterns through communication, and identifying, seeing what things are, breaking down into their parts, and acknowledging it, and not necessarily changing anything, but understanding that change is change, and that's what it is. So, this is at 19 minutes, so it's long. I'm sorry, but I hope I I hope I did it right. Thank you.